The good old days of PlayStation. You gotta love it. Hello everyone, I'm Geek Freak and welcome to the video. This video is going to be something different, and today I want to talk about the retro game consoles and its games. When the PlayStation 1 came out, I fell in love with it. You couldn't get me off the PlayStation 1. I played great games like Duke Nukem, Tomb Raider, Dino Crisis, Bugs Bunny Lost in Time, Spyro the Dragon, all three of them, Crash Bandicoot, Hogs of War, and of course the Dragon Ball games. I had a lot of fun with these games. And it wasn't just the PS1, there was also the GameCube, Game Boy, PS2, Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Sega, and others. I used to love playing these consoles. Banjo-Kazooie, Mario Kart, Sonic the Hedgehog, Pokemon, Mario, Sonic Adventure. There are loads of games out there on different platforms, and games from different countries, from the very first game console to the new PS5. There are loads of games out there, from the absolutely crappy game graphics, to blockbuster Hollywood graphics, to the absolutely fun games, to the outright boring games, to the well-known, to the not so well-known. There are loads of games out there. And you know what? I wouldn't mind going back and playing these old games. To the Game Boy, PS1, GameCube, etc. These days, big massive companies have been taking advantage of nostalgia. You know, like rebooting movies, rebooting series, re-releasing a game franchise like Kingdom Hearts, re-releasing old movies, you know, that sort of thing. And my question is this: why hasn't all these companies who sells games on all these different consoles re-release all these old games? Because I used to love playing all these old games when I was a kid. The Mario games, Sega, Mario, etc. A few of my favourite games from the PS1 was Dino Crisis 2, Hogs of War, Roll Cage 2, Duke Nukem, Spyro the Dragon, and all that jazz. I loved playing all these games. And this is what inspired me to make this video. I'm going to explain how and why all these old games should come back, and to start this off, I just want to let you guys know there are classic console games on Amazon. And I'm not talking about used PlayStation 1s or Sega Mega Drives or Nintendo or anything like that. These classic consoles have been re-released and have already been installed with classic games. The PlayStation 1 has 20 games on it, the Sega Mega Drive has 40 games on it, the Nintendo Classic Mini Console has 21 games on it, and the other Nintendo Classic has around 30 games on it. And I have seen reviews on these consoles. And the major problem that many people have is the lack of games, because there are a lot more games on these old consoles than just 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever. That was the biggest complaint for these consoles. And to be honest, if the PlayStation Store had every single PlayStation 1 game, and even the PlayStation 1 games that I loved, I guarantee you I would have brought them for downloading from the PlayStation Store. But sadly, the PlayStation Store doesn't have any of the classic PS1 games. Well, the last time I checked anyways. And you know what? This seems like the tragic ending for the classic PS1 games. However, don't give up hope. When I was looking up on PS1 games and the classic console, PlayStation 1, I found out that you can actually download old games for the PlayStation 1. Now, if there's any PlayStation 1 fans out there who wants to play the old games, this is what you need to do. Number 1, buy the PlayStation Classic. Number 2, buy the biggest SanDisk USB stick you can find, over 128 gigabytes. And then type into YouTube how to add more games to your PlayStation console Classic. There are a few different ways of doing this, so you guys are just going to have to choose which method that you want to try. And as soon as I get the PlayStation Classic, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to get every single PlayStation game that was ever on the PlayStation 1. And it's not just going to be on the PlayStation 1. I also might do this with the Sega and the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo. And that's only when I get the consoles. But my main priority right now is the PlayStation Classic. And you know what? This is a missed opportunity for all these game console companies to make a profit off of all these classic games. They could have sold all these games on their PlayStation Store from 99 pence to £5. And to be honest, I think it's really sad that the younger generation doesn't appreciate the older games. The older games are just as good as the newer games of today. And even though I'm a story guy, for me, a game should be fun first and foremost. A game isn't about nice graphics, it's about enjoying the game and having fun. And if it wasn't for all these older games, the younger generation wouldn't have their favourite games of today. Which is why it's important to re-release, save and protect all these old games, even if they're terrible games. And this is how I would do it. Number 1, buy a miniature classic game console like the PlayStation Classic, like a miniature one. Number 2, have every single PlayStation 1 game on the PlayStation Store, so that way people will see the variety of games from Japan, Europe, America. Every single PlayStation 1 game in existence is on the PlayStation Store. Number 3, either get a few USB sticks to put all these PlayStation 1 games on when you download them, or get an external hard drive that's over 6 terabytes. And the reason why I said 6 terabytes is because if we was to get every single PlayStation 1 game and we put it on an external hard drive, it would take up 5.22 terabytes of room for every single PlayStation 1 game. Okay, I'm not really 100% sure how many PlayStation 1 games are in existence from every single region, from America to Europe to Japan. But if I had a choice, I would love to have every single PlayStation 1 game. And it isn't just the PlayStation 1. I would also love to have every single Sega game, and every single Nintendo game, and every single Super Nintendo game. I would love to have every single mini console game. And I would also love to have every single game that goes with those mini consoles. And it isn't just the already existing mini console games I want. I would also like a GameCube Mini, a Dreamcast Mini, a Nintendo 64 Mini, an Xbox Mini, a PlayStation 2 Mini. I would like a mini of every single console, if possible. But you know what, only time will tell. But as for the mini consoles we've got now, you can actually download the games that belongs to these consoles. And, just to let you guys know, I've already bought a PlayStation Classic. And so, as soon as it gets here, I am going to start my own collection of PlayStation 1 games. And I'm also going to save up for a Sega Mini, a Nintendo Mini, a Super Nintendo Mini, and I'm going to get all the games for those systems, if it is possible, especially the Sega. When I was young, I always used to love playing Sonic the Hedgehog, but the thing is, I've never actually finished the game, so it'll be a lot of fun when I get the Sega. And, just like I said before, I would like to have a GameCube Mini, and a Dreamcast Mini, and so on and so on. And you know what, having all these mini consoles is a fantastic idea. But there's a few things I would like to address. Number 1, would I like to have remakes of all these games on the PlayStation or the Sega, Nintendo, etc, etc? Well, it's complicated. There are a few games on the PlayStation 1 I would love to see have a remake or a redesign. Like for example, I would love to have a remake of Dino Crisis and Hogs of War. Dino Crisis needs love. The first 2 games were amazing. Yeah, there had a few bugs there and there, but they were fun games. And the same thing can be said for Hogs of War. I absolutely love Hogs of War. Hogs of War was a turn-based game. It was also a strategy game, and it was pretty funny. Hogs of War and Dino Crisis are a few examples of games that needs to be remade and put on the newer generation of game consoles. Dino Crisis is not only fun, but it's intense, scary. It is a pretty decent game. But saying that, Dino Crisis does have a few flaws. Like for example, there's a dinosaur in the game, in the first one, called Certhizozenosaurus. Yeah, I'm literally reading it, and I can't pronounce it. And apparently, these things, in real life, are actually herbivores, not carnivores. I mean, there's a few nitpicks in Dino Crisis 1 with things like that. And in Dino Crisis 2, you know the big dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus Rex? It would only take one bite to kill you in the first game. But now, in Dino Crisis 2, the big dinosaurs are actually nipping you instead of taking you whole. And also, there's the size of the Giganotosaurus compared to the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The Giganotosaurus in Dino Crisis 2 looks like a freaking kaiju. Giganotosaurus isn't supposed to be that big. You guys know what I'm talking about. It's all these little nitpicks that need to be changed for scientific accuracy. Now, when it comes to Hogs of War is stupidly simple. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Hogs of War. But considering all the technology we have for creating games, if they was to update not only the graphics, but they could also add a lot more things in. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in another video for Hogs of War. If Hogs of War was going to be remade, I'm going to put in my suggestions of what I'd like to see if Hogs of War was going to be remade. Now you guys can tell that I'm not against games being remade, because we'll always have the original games. I'm always ready and willing to give remakes a chance. However, there are things in remakes that really ticks me off. Like for example, Ratchet & Clank 2016. Oh my god, they completely ruined Ratchet & Clank. The 2016 reboot remake made Ratchet & Clank bland. And even though the graphics look nice, they ruined Ratchet & Clank's development. For me, I didn't like it. 2016 Ratchet & Clank was a reboot remake. They should have gone with the Spyro the Dragon route and made everything exactly the same like it was in the PlayStation 1. But in this case, Ratchet & Clank came from PlayStation 2. The Ratchet & Clank franchise should have taken a lesson out of Spyro the Dragon's book and did everything exactly the same like they did in the original games. Spyro the Dragon's games was done word for word from the original game on PlayStation 1. Yeah, I forgot to mention that Spyro the Dragon was remade. I believe it was called the Reignited Trilogy or something. And from what I've seen and heard from these games, they kept everything the same and just updated the visuals and the characters. And the redesigns for the characters were, I wouldn't say they were good or bad. I mean, some of the designs were pretty good. Most of them. But there was one design that I didn't like, and it was the Sorcerer's design from the third game. In the remake, in the original game of Spyro the Dragon, she looked very menacing and she was intimidating. Despite the way she looked back then, she was a very intimidating character. But in the remake, she's a lot less intimidating and looks more goofy. And the way she runs in her boss fight, she looks ridiculous. In the original, she was intimidating, and in the new one, she looks ridiculous. What I'm trying to get at is, there are going to be games that needs to be remade. Sometimes the original games will have their problems and they need to be fixed, and even when a game does get remade, it's not going to be perfect either. As long as they don't go down the 2016 Ratchet & Clank route, then everything will be okay. And even if an old game was to get remade, there are going to be nitpicks. But you know what, as long as they're nitpicks, I am 100% okay with them making remakes of games. And even if we don't like the remakes, there's always the originals. And if they was to remake any of these old games, then I hope they take the Spyro route. Now the next thing I want to talk about is franchise games on other platforms. Okay, let me ask you guys this. How many of you out there loves a certain franchise? And it's a long running franchise. Let me give you guys a few examples. There's Kingdom Hearts, the Ratchet & Clank franchise, Dino Crisis, God of War, Dead Space, and there's loads of other franchises that are long running. Now the reason why I bring this up is because some of you may have come across this. Let's just say for example that you're a fan of Kingdom Hearts for example, like I am. And when you played the first game, you fell in love with it. And then after the first one there was a few other games, Kingdom Hearts 2, Chain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts Coded, Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, Kingdom Hearts 3D, Dream Drop Distance, Kingdom Hearts Unchained X, and so on and so on. Now let me ask you guys this. What do all these games have in common, besides from their names? All of these games are on different consoles, and not on the PlayStation 2 or the PS3, or the PS4. Now, I was a huge Kingdom Hearts fan, and I still am. And when I heard Chain of Memories was coming out, and all these other titles were coming out, I was excited, because, again, I'm a huge Kingdom Hearts fan. But the problem was, either one of two things. Number one, they were on different platforms, like the PlayStation Portable, the Game Boy Advance, your mobile phone, etc, etc. And the other problem was, there were certain Kingdom Hearts games that wasn't released in the West, like the Final Mix games, where there was a lot more stuff that the original Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 didn't have in the original games. Now these games weren't originally released in the West, but after so many years, they finally managed to release them in the West. And not just the remixes, almost every single Kingdom Hearts game that was on other platforms was also added to the remix release. So that was good news. The main point what I'm trying to get at is this. Let's just say for example that you've got yourself an Xbox 2 or a PlayStation 3, just for example, and you're a huge fan of a particular franchise, and you've been following this franchise for years. And when you was told that the next installment of your favorite franchise is going to be released, you're obviously going to feel happy about it. But later on, you're told that the next installment of your favorite franchise isn't going to be on the PlayStation 2 or the Xbox 2, but instead, it's going to be on the PlayStation Portable, or it could be on the Nintendo Wii. Or if you're a PlayStation consumer and you hear that this installment of your favorite game is going to be on the Xbox 2 instead of the PlayStation 3, you're going to feel very, very annoyed, because you've only got your Xbox and you don't have any other console, but you desperately want to play the next installment of your favorite game. It's like me, for example. I'm a huge fan of the Dino Crisis series. I've played Dino Crisis 1 and 2, and it is a fun game. And then, when I heard there was going to be a Dino Crisis 3, I was really excited about it. But later on, I found out that Dino Crisis 3 is only going to be on the Xbox. And that's the thing, I didn't have an Xbox. So, after years of waiting, I decided to get myself an Xbox and get the game Dino Crisis 3. And yeah, it wasn't that much good of a game. And I wasn't really into the Xbox. So, I've wasted a lot of money on a console that's on its way out for a game that wasn't all that great. And this can be said for any franchise. You could be following any franchise, and one day you're told that the next installment is going to be released on the PlayStation Portable, but you don't have a PlayStation Portable, you've only got yourself the Xbox 360. You get what I'm saying now? It is a right asshole when you don't have the console to your favourite game franchise. The main point what I'm trying to get at is, if they was to ever make a PlayStation 2 Mini or a GameCube Mini or an Xbox Mini, a Game Boy Mini, you know, a Mini for every single old game consoles, this problem will just go away. Let me give you an example. You know the Ratchet & Clank game, Size Matters? That was on the PlayStation Portable, and the graphics for Ratchet & Clank Size Matter game is very similar to the PlayStation and PlayStation 3 graphics. So let's just say, for example, they decide to release a PlayStation 2 Mini. They could release Ratchet & Clank Size Matter onto the PlayStation 2 Mini. You guys get what I'm saying now? They could put the entire franchise onto one mini console. Well, it sort of depends really. Some console graphics aren't exactly going to work on other consoles. I mean, I'm no game technician or anything like that, but I hope they can try and do something like that. And even if they can't, there is always a possibility of other consoles getting the mini treatment. I mean, come on, I don't see Dino Crisis 3, which is an Xbox game, working on a PlayStation 1 console. But you know what, we can dream and hope this becomes a reality. So let's just hope we get a PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, Xbox, etc. Mini, so we can play those consoles games. Or they could do something similar like they did with Kingdom Hearts, where they put all the Kingdom Hearts games onto one disc, or a few discs. And there's another thing I'd like to talk about. You know those games that's exclusive to the Xbox store, or the PlayStation store, or the Nintendo store? The games that never got a physical release, and you had to download them digitally from the PlayStation or Xbox or the Nintendo store. Let me give you guys an example. There's this game that goes with my favourite franchise, Dead Space, and it's called Dead Space Ignition. And this game takes place somewhere between Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2. When you play this game, you play as this engineer, and his job is to unlock doors and hack systems. Now, if you was to play this game and do all the hacking missions, you'll be able to open doors in Dead Space 2. You'll be able to get to spaces that you couldn't get to unless you played Dead Space Ignition. And the thing is, I bought this game years ago, and I decided to replay the entire Dead Space series. And when I went to go and play Dead Space Ignition, I couldn't find it anywhere, so it looks like I'd had to repurchase Dead Space Ignition, and I really didn't want to do that, so I decided to leave it. Again, if they was able to make a PlayStation 3 Mini, and we are able to download all these digital games from the PlayStation Store, then it would be perfect. Not only would we be able to have the physical games downloaded to a classic system, but also digital games that was on the PlayStation Store. So if we do get a PlayStation 3 Mini, I hope not only do we get the physical games, but also the digital games from the PlayStation Store, and the Xbox Store, and the Nintendo Store. You guys get it. You know what I'm talking about. I would love to have the digital games from the online store as well, and if possible, the add-ons as well. And also, speaking of add-ons, before I continue, alright, I know we have the Nintendo Mini, and it's most likely going to be the same as the PlayStation Classic, where we can download old classic Nintendo games. But here's the thing, what about the games that need special controllers, like the duck game? You know, that game where we have to shoot the ducks, and if we get one, the dog pops up holding it. I mean, what's Nintendo going to do about that? Are they going to release a gun for that game, for the Nintendo Mini? And it isn't just that. What about the other add-ons for these mini consoles? Are they going to release those as well? I don't know about the other add-ons for the game consoles, but I do know there's a few, just like that gun for Duck Hunt. If there are other add-ons out there that could go with the consoles, please let me know. Now, like I said before, I would like to have a GameCube Mini, a Dreamcast Mini, an Xbox Mini, a Nintendo 64 Mini, basically every mini of the old classic consoles. And, just like I said before, I would like to have every single game for all these classic consoles, from Europe, America, and Japan. I just love the thought of having all the classic games for these classic consoles. For me, I would love to play Banjo-Kazooie on the Nintendo 64 again. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about is when people put games from another console to another console. I'm pretty sure many of you out there have seen this. On YouTube, while I was doing my research, I've seen people play games that was meant to be played on other consoles on the PlayStation Classic. Nintendo games, Dreamcast, Sega games. Now, here's the thing. I don't really like the idea that we could play other systems' games on the PlayStation because it wouldn't feel right. If I was to play Banjo-Kazooie on the PS1, it wouldn't feel right because Banjo-Kazooie belongs on the Nintendo 64. Banjo-Kazooie needs a Nintendo 64 controller. And also, I don't think the graphics in Banjo-Kazooie is compatible with the PlayStation 1. At the very least, I don't think so anyways. However, if there isn't going to be a Nintendo 64 Mini, then I guess there'll be no choice but to play it on the PlayStation 1. If Banjo and Kazooie is compatible with the PlayStation 1. I have seen people play different games from other platforms on the PlayStation 1 Classic. If we can't get other console classics, I guess we'll have no choice but to play them on the PlayStation 1. Well, I mean, if we can get them on the PlayStation 1. Well, you know what they say, beggars can't be choosers. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the generation of consoles. There are 9 generations of video game consoles. Believe it or not, the first generation of video game consoles had over 900 video game consoles. And this first generation was between 1972 to 1984. And you know what? I'm like, what? 900 video game consoles? If this is the case, they need to put every single game that was on these consoles and compact them into a completely different game console to fit all these games in. To be fair, I wouldn't mind checking these games out. And yes, I know they're going to be completely old. I mean, like, very, very ancient. But you know what? I'm curious. I would like to see what sort of games was on all of these game consoles in the first generation. And the same can be said for the second generation. And instead of being 900 game consoles, there is actually 19 game consoles. And the second generation has the Atari 200 and 600. And when it comes to the third generation, there was 23 video game consoles. And this is the generation where we got the Nintendo Entertainment System. And, as we all know, is also the home of Mario. The fourth generation had 17 video game consoles. And this generation had the favorite Sega Genesis. The fifth generation had 14 video game consoles, and this generation had 2 of my personal favorites, the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 1. And even though I know that the Sega Saturn was beloved by everybody, my parents didn't get me it. The sixth generation had the Dreamcast, the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 2, Xbox. This generation had 10 video game consoles. The seventh generation had 7 video game consoles like the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 and the Wii. And the 8th generation had 4 video game consoles, which was the Wii U, the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. And the 9th generation so far has 2 video game consoles, which will be the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. Now, in my honest opinion, I think they should put every single game that was in the first generation onto one platform because, hey, they are not going to be able to make a mini console from 900 video game consoles. So the best idea is to put every single game console game from the first generation onto one video game console. And the same can be said for the second generation. Put all the games that was in those consoles onto one console. So that way, both these generations will be called the first generation and the second generation. Now, when it comes to the third generation, besides from the Nintendo Entertainment System, I think all of the third generation should be put into one game console, except for the Nintendo Entertainment System, because it's a very well-known and beloved game system. Besides, the Nintendo Entertainment System's already been re-released into a mini console. Now, when it comes to the fourth generation, obviously the Sega Genesis has its own Sega Genesis Mini, but as for the others, I haven't seen or played any of these. The only well-known one I've ever played was the Sega Genesis. And obviously there's the Super Famicom, but I've never actually played that either. So I think that the Super Famicom should have its own mini console. And as for the rest, again, they should all be put into one console. Now, when it comes to the fifth generation, we have the PS1, which has already been made into a mini console. And when it comes to the Nintendo 64, I believed that the Nintendo 64 should have its own mini console, like the PlayStation Classic and the Sega Genesis. And maybe the Sega Saturn should have its own mini console. Okay, now, when it comes to the sixth generation, it's going to be obvious. The Dreamcast should have its own mini console. The PlayStation 2 should have its own mini console. Same with the GameCube, the Xbox. Those 4 game consoles are the most well known to me. So yeah, those 4 should definitely get their own mini console. And as for the rest, again, they should all be put into one big console. Now, I'm coming into the 7th generation, which has the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 and the Wii. I think it might be a little bit too early for the 360 and the PlayStation 3 and the Wii to have their own mini game console. But as for the not so well known game consoles, again, they should all be put into one big massive console. And when it comes to the 8th generation, I'm not going to bother because it's too early, way too early for these consoles to have their own mini consoles. And even though the 8th generation is on its way out, again, it's way too soon for these consoles to have their own mini console. And considering that there's only 4 video game consoles in this generation, and very well known video game consoles, again, it's way too early for these consoles to have their own mini consoles. And the same thing can be said for the handheld game consoles. Just like what I said with the other game consoles, the most well known game consoles should get their own mini, and as for the rest, all their games should be put into one console, and from the look of it, there seems to be 82 handheld platforms. And judging by the look of these handheld game consoles, some of them might actually be too difficult to put their games into one game console like the rest. But like I said, the well-known ones should have their own mini, and the not so well-known ones should be all put together. So that way, every single game that was ever made would get to be played on. For me, I just like this idea. And even though the PlayStation, the Sega Genesis, the Nintendo Entertainment System, and the Super Nintendo only has fewer games, we can easily add more games thanks to hacking, which loads of people are doing with their PlayStations and their Segas and their Nintendos, etc, etc. We can easily put all the games onto these mini consoles thanks to hacking, and even if the games are too big, we can easily put all the games on an external hard drive. And we could also add phone games, and the games from all three regions, Japan, America and Europe, and all the digital games from the store and their add-ons. For me, this would be a fantastic idea. Now, if you guys was to pin me down and demand which top 5 game consoles I would like to see be made into minis, well, I'll give you the answer. Number 5, the Dreamcast. Number 4, the Nintendo 64. Number 3, the Nintendo GameCube. Number 2, the Xbox. And number 1, the PlayStation 2. And as for an honourable mention, the Sega Saturn. If all these were made into minis, and I mean literally every single game console, including the handhelds, it would be a lot of fun getting all these games and playing them. Whew, that was a long one. Well, what do you guys think? Which game console would you like to see have a mini console? If your favourite game console was made into a mini, which games would you play? Do you like these ideas? Did I miss something? Please leave comments in the comment section below, and let's get a conversation going. I'm Geek Freak, peace out. Thank you guys for watching, and if there's a series you want me to check out and review and give my thoughts on it, or if there's a top 10 list you want me to do, or any reactions, or responses, or rants on anything geeky, just leave links and comments in the comment sections below, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. If you guys want to go and check out my other social medias, I'm on Gab, Discord, BitChute, Tumblr, Dailymotion, Reddit, Subscribestar, Minds, Instagram, Twitch, DeviantArt, Pinterest, my anime list, and Vidya. And don't forget to check out my Skeptic channel, Gypsy Freak. And my other social medias are down there in the description box below, so if you want to go and check them out, please do. And if you guys want to support this channel, I'm on PayPal, Patreon, and GoFundMe. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss another video. I'm Geek Freak, peace out.